why it's significant for farmers to be considering your grazing management, because what we've kind of discussed already, the more you manage, probably the more profit you can make, and probably the healthier your soils and livestock and land is going to be. So it really is kind of all about management. So let's go and dive about that.
Yeah, I think it's figuring out, it goes back to some of the principles that we talked about of grazing management. There's some things there about the rest, recovery, period of grasses. All of those are things that you can apply just if you're grazing in Alabama or Arizona or Virginia, wherever, all those things kind of apply. I'll share a few, practices that we really like to use. We use a lot of temporary fence. It's something that works for us quite well. In fact, I don't want to continue farming if I couldn't have my polywire and my reels. It's just something that we use, and it's just part of our culture, if you will, here in Rogers Cattle Company. Things like, simply stockpiling forages. That's one that anybody that's new to managed grazing or just getting started, I love to get them. I say, okay, let's just stockpile some forages. Doesn't matter how much. Let's stockpile some. And then get them used to using the temporary fence. Maybe moving cattle every 1 to 3 days is kind of usually reasonable for most people. And the reason I always started with stockpile forage is because I think the payback is much better there than it is maybe moving animals, 1 to 3 days during the growing season. I'm not saying that's not important. It is. I think that's the next step down the road. But if you got to start somewhere, let's start with that stockpile forage. It's just like hay in the barn, it's just standing out there, and then get them used to, get a geared reel in their hands and some step-in post, kind of show them how to use it, and then let them meter that hay out. Let them see the manure distribution that's behind it. And, you'll turn some of those manure pats over in February, and you say, dang, there's an earthworm or two, and it's February, and you're going, my gosh, how can that be? Well, it's pasture ecology, that's why we call it amazing grazing. A lot of cool things happen out there with our management, and so we'll talk about some practices like that, and again, it kind of goes back to it's relevant and important now more than ever. I think what we do out on grasslands is a big deal, and that's part of the things that kind of drives to me is to be involved in grassland agriculture. And I think it goes beyond the scope of just our farm. Certainly it can provide maybe a livelihood, or certainly a good, great hobby. It's a lot of fun, for a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with having farms and grassland farms as a hobby. But I also think it's an important part of the water cycle. It's habitat, for wildlife. Certainly, we use pasture-based systems to, maybe distribute, some animal waste, to treat waste, not just animals, but human waste as well. So we ask the soil to do a lot of things for us. And then again, it goes back to that water cycle, and I think that's a big deal. So those of us that are out here in agriculture, specifically pasture-based agriculture, what we do is a big deal, and I think it goes beyond just the production of food. I think it creates an aesthetically pleasing environment. The landscape that we typically have out on our pasture-based systems, are really very pleasing to the eye. Maybe not so much this year. If it gets a little muddy at times, maybe not every place is aesthetically pleasing, but overall, it's very aesthetically pleasing. I think something that's probably valued by our neighbors. Maybe even if they don't tell us, I have a feeling there's some value there. And I know when we have lambs born, in the spring, some of our neighbors will drop by. They just want to just drive down there. It's kind of the side of our driveway, and we lamb out there, and they just want to come by and see the lambs. So. That interaction, with the public and our communities, I think is a big deal, and certainly something we need to, we probably need to foster that. And because again, we are only 2% or less of the population, so in agriculture, so we need to be good neighbors and go from there. So.